Dear colleagues, dear friends, dear guests, the European Defence Agency was established in an area of optimism. In 2003, my Professor Javier Solana, my predecessor, wrote that Europe had never been so safe and prosperous. Just over a decade later, Russia invaded a part of Ukraine and took it for its own. 20 years later, and Russia's economy is in a war mode. Putin is spending well over a third of its budget, of his country's budget, on the military. This is triple that it is before the war. He shows no sign of stopping or slowing down. People say I'm a Russia hawk. Well, I like to say that I'm a realist. For too long we have offered Russia alternatives, hoping that it would choose cooperation and economic prosperity for its people over fraudulent imperialistic ambitions. But instead, Russia's defense industry is churning out tanks, glide bombs, artillery shells in vast quantities. In 3 months, they can produce more weapons and more ammunition than we can in 12. This is a heavily militarized country that presents an existential threat to us all. We are running out of time. The Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and ours. They are all buying us time. And from day one, the European Union and the member states have stood by their side. We have provided well over 134 billion euros in total, close to 50 billion euro in military support. This makes us the biggest international donor of Ukraine. We will have trained 75,000 Ukrainian soldiers by the end of this month. We have adopted the most wide-sweeping sanctions we have ever imposed. You cannot fuel an illegal war, deny a country its sovereignty, or kill innocent civilians and get away with it. Russia must take responsibility for its actions, and it has to pay. This is also why the windfall profits from the frozen assets of Russia, they accrued more than 3 billion euro last year, are being spent on Ukraine. This is more ammunition, more air defense, and cash injection in the European defense industry. I also want to look into doing even more, including on immobilized assets to fight for Ukraine. Every day Russia continues its war, the price must go up. Now we are working on a 16th package of sanctions. We have started to see Russia's economy taking a serious hit. They could not afford to continue their efforts in Syria while fighting in Ukraine. Russia's national funds are quickly depleting. The national interest rate is well over 20%. And they are getting far fewer resources from gas and oil. Gazprom and Sberbank are looking at mass layoffs. There is absolutely no doubt that we can do more to help Ukraine. With our help, they can also win the war. The only language that Putin speaks is the language of strength. The EU has strength. Together, EU member states' economies are 17 times bigger than that of Russia's economy. We must force his hand to show him that he will lose, and stop him before he attacks one of our own. At the root of Europe's strength is our political and economic union. This is why, as soon as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania left the Soviet prison, we all joined the European Union and NATO and swore that we will never be alone again. Together, we are just so much stronger. From bitter competition to peaceful and constructive competition. This is how Robert Schuman described the Union of Europe's coal and steel sectors in 1950. Of course, he was talking about removing the possibility for Europeans to wage war on each other. And it led to enduring peace between us. Today we face war from outside. It's time to come together again. As we integrated our economies before, today we need integration in defense and interoperability on the ground. We do not need a European army. We need 27 European armies that are capable and can effectively work together to deter our rivals and defend Europe, preferably with our allies and partners, but alone if needed. An incrementalist approach to defense cannot work. We must stop tiptoeing around. This agency lives and breathes European defense, but the rest of us need to do it as well. In practice, this means, first, the EU population that understands what is at stake. Second, more spending on defense. Third, a society that is prepared for this. Fourth, EU member states with strong military capabilities and strong defense industries. And fifth, more cooperation with our partners. This is what we are now looking for in our white paper and the preparedness strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, many of our national intelligence agencies are giving us the information that Russia could test EU's readiness to defend itself in 3 to 5 years. Who else are we listening to if not them? We need to have public understanding of the threats we face. Close to 80% of Europeans are in favor of common defense and security policy among the European countries. Over 70% agree that the European Union needs to reinforce its capacity to produce military equipment. So I think our citizens know what is at stake. But politicians need to catch up too. Russia is not the problem for some, but for all of us. Europeans need to wake up. Last year, member states collectively spent an average 1.9% of GDP on defense. Russia is spending 9%. We spend billions on our schools, welfare, healthcare, but if we do not invest more in defense, all of this is at risk. Europe's failure to invest in military capabilities also sends a dangerous signal to the aggressor. Weakness invites them in. President Trump is right to say that we don't spend enough. It's time to invest. We need investment from member states and the private sector, but also from the common European budget. We must spend more than 1%. We need to relay a message that we are serious about our commitment to European defense. Even when we allocate enough money, we also cannot just go to the shop and buy a couple of tanks, air defense system and a couple of helmets. The decisions we make today will only materialize in years from now. 2 at best, but a decade in some cases. I know I'm talking to a room full of experts, and those at the European Defence Agency know very well. Defence is highly skilled, highly intense industry which requires money, people and time. We have money and people, but we don't have time. Ukraine is buying us time. No, we are not yet at war, not yet. But as my friend Mark Rutte said when he stood on this stage a few weeks ago, we are not at peace either. We need to prepare. There's nothing that cannot be weaponized against us today. Putin's regime is already undertaking increasingly brazen acts of sabotage, cyber attacks in Spain and Czechia, election interference in Romania and Moldova, parcel bombs in Germany, disinformation campaigns, jamming of GPS systems that stop aircraft from landing, damage to underwater cables. We are already the targets of a hybrid war. In December, for the first time ever, we imposed sanctions on such attacks. 16 people and 3 companies were sanctioned. Last week, we adopted a plan for the cybersecurity of hospitals and healthcare providers. The security risk that the hospitals need to worry about a decade ago was some drug addicts coming and stealing the morphine. Today, cyber attack could turn off life-supporting machines, shut down operating theaters, and prevent patients from getting life-saving treatment. Today, this sector is the most attacked sector in the EU. We must include it in the discussions for defense. Hybrid attacks are often used to prelude to conventional attack, and they are conducted in parallel with the conventional attacks. As Sauli Niinistö's underlined in his report on preparedness, we must prepare for the worst. Ladies and gentlemen, the military needs capabilities and industrial strength from one member state to the next are hugely diverse. From ammunition to air defense, from long-range missiles to cyber defense, from military mobility to the need for protection of borders and underwater cables. This is also what explains the differences in approaches to defense as well as geography. Last week I met the member states to discuss what we should prioritize on the EU level. Because it is important that the member states agree where the EU can best support everyone to develop their capabilities. Beyond this, it is important to link the capability planning and EU defence industrial policy. This is why Commissioner Kubilius and I want to put forward an industrial output plan. Here we must also learn from our past experiences. The Million Rounds initiative for Ukraine was an Estonian idea, and although we have now delivered well over 1 million rounds, in the end it was too little, too late. We need to make sure that we can ramp up our defense industry and get the products we need on time. We need to join up what we know about our capability gaps and how much we are missing with our own industries can produce. Then we can see how best to help the industry produce this and work with our allies in the cases where we can't do it in-house. I see the EDA with an instrumental role here. For decades, Europe has produced strategic documents, roadmaps, and declarations. It's time we move beyond to more missiles, tanks, and ships. Russia might have few friends, but Europe has much more. The US, the UK, NATO. First, the United States. They are our strongest ally and must remain so. A strategically competitive and increasingly confrontational world needs us both, and our transatlantic bond at its strongest. As two of the most powerful economic blocs on the planet, we are a vital artery to the global economy, and our prosperity is intertwined. The EU is one of the biggest export markets for the US after Canada and Mexico. 65% of direct foreign investments to the US come from Europe. The transatlantic economy employs more than 16 million workers in onshore jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. And in Europe, US companies are earning more than 2.5 times more than they are from Asia. We also share a common vision for the safe world. Our adversaries are cooperating and coordinating their actions against us. We must work together against the axis of upheaval. The biggest concern for the United States is China. But the fact is that if we do not get Russia right, we will not get China right either. China is closely watching how the transatlantic community responds to Russia's invasion to Ukraine. We need to make sure that the lesson is learned. Aggression as a foreign policy tool can never pay off. Ukraine's security against Russia is security for us all. Weakness here would only feed the confidence of our strategic rivals. But the EU's message to the US is clear. We must do more for our own defense and shoulder a fair share of responsibility for Europe's security. And we can be a closer partner for the US in the Indo-Pacific. On UK, they have left the Union, but they have not left Europe. They're still part of Europe. And they are one of our strongest military powers in Europe. The UK is a key partner for the European Union. We need a mutually beneficial relationship on security and defence. A new agreement on this would be a logical next step. This brings me to the NATO cooperation. NATO remains the foundation of collective defence and is crucial for the Euro-Atlantic security. The EU and NATO have 23 members in common. We are the most natural partners. And at the time when we worry about attacks against us, we need to concentrate our EU defence capability priorities where they are most needed. Less crisis management, more collective defence. This is what the European Defence Agency should help with too. Because every EU member state has a single set of defence planners and one defence budget. With this approach, the EU will support NATO, we will support each other's work, not duplicate each other's efforts. 20 years after the European Defence Agency was born, I don't think we are seeing the full potential of this agency yet. I wanted to do more. And this will also complement NATO's work on fragmentation across 11 main categories of major weapon systems, aircraft, ground vehicles, and combat vessels. The US has 32, and we, in Europe, we have 172. In practice, this fragmentation pushes the costs up, limits interoperability, and creates logistical issues. Ukraine receives several different types of artillery systems and shells from us. They have had to adjust their guns when they are firing. We need to consolidate our defence industry and develop common weapon systems. Our European defence industry could then use the same military systems and help member states' militaries become more interoperable. The EDA already helps to create these synergies through cooperation projects with several member states. And in a single market with huge untapped industrial potential, the EU should also work for a single market on defence. On research and innovation, I also see the European Defence Agency as a real European incubator for defence. It can bring our brightest minds together for research and innovation on future defence projects. We should also think about defence in terms of jobs and innovation that is extremely positive for the rest of us and for the rest of society too. Without innovation in defence, we would not have the internet, the GPS, nuclear energy, or drones. Likewise, defence should reap the benefits of civilian-driven innovation in AI, robotics, and space. The EDA is currently working on satellite technology that could have huge benefits for our militaries. They are looking at how to easily maneuver satellites from low orbits where observation is better, but the risks of satellite damage is higher, back to the higher orbits where they are safer. And when together we invest, it costs much, much less. Ladies and gentlemen, although I see around the room mostly gentlemen, as we celebrate 20 years of the European Defence Agency, we are no longer in an area of optimism, but of opposition. We all need to be realistic about Russia. Russia poses existential threat to our security today, tomorrow, and for as long as we underinvest in our defence. 3 priorities. First, Ukraine is Europe's front line for defence. We need more, faster and stronger support for Ukraine. Because the only language that Kremlin understands is the language of strength. Russia is not invincible. Russia's limited territorial gains in Ukraine come with unsustainably high losses and a crumbling economy. Time is not on Russia's side, but it's not necessarily on our side either, because we are not yet doing enough. Second, there should be no doubt in any of our minds that we need to spend more to prevent war. But we also need to prepare for war. We need to improve our capabilities. We need our defense industry to produce what we need. We must prepare for the worst. But we also should see this as a positive opportunity to develop stronger technological base in Europe. And third, we must work together with our allies too, with the United States, the UK and NATO and our partners across the globe. In such turbulent times, we need to stick together. There are countries that are fighting against us all, that are directly opposed to who we are, what we stand for, and the way we live our lives. Together, we have more than enough strength to defeat them. We must make use of this strength. Thank you.